I'm back. Did you miss me? Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie Tee? Welcome to the 78th installment of the Louie Tee Network Podcast. I, of course, am your set man, Louie Tee. Thank you for joining me. Man, it's been a while since I've been behind the mic doing a pod, and I've been talking to my loyal listeners who have been asking, yo, where's the pod? I need it. And I said, look, I'm rebranding. I'm going to roll it back out. And I've been planning this for a while now. I've been kind of preparing myself. You know, the move kind of got in the way a bit. So it took a little bit of time, but finally we've reached the point where we're back at it, where we're supposed to be. And it feels really good. Feels good to be back behind the mic, chopping it up with you guys on the Louie Tee Network Podcast. And we're now on YouTube with this thing. And trust me, if you've been getting this podcast on one of your various platforms, whether it's Spotify or Google Podcast or Apple Podcast or TuneIn or Stitcher, wherever you're getting this, you're still going to be able to get it there as well. But for those of you who are too lazy to travel onto one of those platforms to get the podcast, now I'm coming to you. So now we're on YouTube. And this is going to be a show that I'll do live, in the future. I just want to work out the kinks before I go live with it. But nonetheless, feels good to be back behind the mic, and we got a lot to chop up and discuss. It's been a while since I've been here, so I want to go back and tackle some issues that I have missed because we haven't been doing this podcast and haven't been on this platform in a while. And I just want to give some of you out there a quick discretion advisory warning that I'm a little bit more raunchy on my podcast than I am on my channel. So if you're not used to this Louie Tee, get used to this Louie Tee, or you might have to check out, because sometimes I might have a couple of beverages and come up here and jump on the pod. It's a little different. For those of you who have listened before, then you already know that. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. But for those of you who haven't, it's a little different here on the Louie Tee Network Podcast. Just warning you up front. That being said, want to jump into the gem dropping session for today. And when I thought about this topic for today, first of all, let me drop this gem on your melon. Open your mind, let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man Louie Tee E. Let me open you up, get you thinking a little bit. So today's gem dropping session is on the potential NFL season. And when I was thinking about this episode, generally I don't come up with a name before the show. It's usually something that I say in the show, and that's what I named the show. But when I was doing the prep work for this particular episode, I started thinking to myself, what are you going to tell the viewers and the listeners of this pod when you drop this gem on their melon? And I said, I'm going to tell them that this is going to be an NFL season quite like no other. It's going to be unique in nature, and there are going to be a lot of pitfalls, and there are going to be a lot of things that you're going to have to adjust to as a fan. All right. Forget about the lack of fans being in the stands. I don't really give a shit about that. It may feel different watching it. I just want to see tackle football, so I could care less if there are fans there or not. Bottom line is, what I'm really referring to is the fact that either you're all in on having a season no matter what, or you just need to get the hell out. But what I don't want to do is hear you bitching and complaining. So I think the name of this episode might ultimately be Stop Bitching. Okay? Because at the end of the day, you're going to have players miss games because of COVID. You're going to have teams potentially have to cancel games that may cost you at the end of the season. You may have to forfeit a game because you couldn't play because you didn't have enough players. And a bunch of dudes tested positive on Friday evening for COVID-19. And all of a sudden, 24 of your 53 guys on your roster are out for Sunday's game. And you can't get that many guys to come in and fill that void that quickly. And so just like that, you got to cancel the game, you forfeit, and now that's a loss on your record. That's going to happen. That may happen to some teams this year. You may have 8 guys out from COVID, and one of them might be your starting quarterback. Two of the other 8 might be your starting wide receivers. One might be your starting edge rusher, your best edge rusher. One might be a starting corner. You're going to have to deal with that. And if you're not prepared to deal with that, with what comes with having a season amidst a pandemic like COVID-19, then don't sign up. But what I don't want to hear you doing is bitching and complaining, because it's going to happen. It's inevitable. All right. Don't think for one second. Now, we are watching the NBA and the NHL have flawless records with their testing, and no one's testing positive. They're in bubbles, guys. They're in bubbles, and they're following and adhering to strict guidelines. That's not going to happen. You already saw what happened in Major League Baseball with the Marlins and even the Cardinals to a lesser extent. All right. These are young guys in the prime of their upbringing, in the prime of their youth. Okay, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27-year-old guys. A lot of them without families. A lot of them want to go out and have fun. Don't think for one second after a big victory over the 49ers, who were in the Super Bowl last year representing the NFC, or a big win over the Chiefs. Don't think for one second your starting cornerback, who's 25 years old, isn't going to go out to the club. Okay? Don't think for one second that they're not going to a bar to have a few drinks. Don't think for one second that every single guy on your team is going to follow strict guidelines, which is, hey, go home, get some rest, come back to the facility, watch film, lift weights, whatever the case may be, go back home, do it all again over tomorrow. That's not the way this is going to go. You have to know that going in to this season, that guys are going to break protocol. Guys are going to do what it is they want to do. And you keep hearing this from players. We just got to trust that the guy next to us is going to do what he's supposed to do. We're just going to have to trust that these guys are going to do the things that are going to allow us to play. Good luck with that. Okay. Everyone that has a family at home, you don't have to worry about those guys. The guys that have 2 kids and a wife at home, those aren't the guys you got to worry about. It's the guys that are single, that are bachelors, that are young, free, and want to have fun. All right. And those are the guys that are probably going to F it up for a lot of the other players on the team. And as fans, they're probably going to F it up for us as well, because I've said this all along, and I'm going to stick steadfast to this. I don't anticipate this season meeting its completion. I don't think we're going to get through 16 games. Once the flu season hits, I think it's going to really become that much harder to tell if a guy has COVID. Obviously, you're still going to have testing, but if he's got a fever, you just say, hey, just stay away from the facility. And, we've seen it in the past where a guy's got the flu or he's got a fever, shows up to the facility and 2 or 3 other guys get it. But, you push forward. You forge on. That's not the case anymore. You got the flu, you still got to stay home, and so I think you're going to see a situation where we get to right around late October, maybe early November, and that's when I think the season might be in a little bit of jeopardy. I'm hoping we make it to that point. I'll take anything at this point. You already see what's going on with college football, and that's another subject for another day, but I'll just say this. They shouldn't play college football. It's a stark contrast between college and NFL. And I know you're thinking to yourself, Louie T, what the hell are you talking about? It's the same goddamn thing, just younger players. Well, yeah, to a degree, but those guys aren't getting paid. It's not their job. And I know a lot of prominent college football players want to play. I've heard Trevor Lawrence come out vocally on Twitter, on socials, numerous times saying that he wants to play. Justin Fields has talked very, very vigorously about wanting to play. It's not up to those guys. And at the end of the day, college football it's a business just like the NFL is. But they have an interest to protect. If you're in university and something happens to one of these players, there's no such thing as, just have these guys sign waivers. That's not allowed. Something goes wrong, it's going to fall back on the university. It's going to fall back on that conference. And so you have to protect yourself. You got to protect these players. And you got to protect your institution for that matter. And so these guys aren't being paid to play. So to me, if if you're looking at the college football game, I don't anticipate many of those conferences playing. We've already seen the Big Ten and the Pac-12 already call it quits, along with the MAC, which the MAC made no sense because most of their sales and their money comes from ticket sales at the booth. Getting into the stadium. They don't have massive TV deals like the Pac-12 or the Big Ten or the SEC or the ACC for that matter. So they were going to cancel their season just because they can't have fans in the stands. But again, I digress. Don't bitch. All right. No bitching this year. Either you want to see the NFL in all of its splendor, no matter what, and you know that you're going to have to put up with a couple of your players or a bunch of your players being out or even having a game canceled and you having to forfeit, your team having to forfeit. Either you go into the season knowing that or just sit it out, okay? But no bitching, all right? So that's the gym dropping session for today as we now progress into the 2020 NFL draft, and I want to recap the 2020 NFL draft. So I want to look at the top 11 picks in this past spring's draft. Again, just as a little bit of a refresher, because again, a lot of us can't remember who was drafted, 11th overall. Can't remember who was drafted 7th overall. It's been a while. We haven't had that refresher that is the offseason and minis and all of those things. We're into now the training camp portion of the offseason, but this isn't a real training camp for all intents and purposes. I mean, a lot of these teams aren't even putting on helmets until, later on this week, the 13th, the 14th of this week. And then they're not even putting on pads until the 18th, the 19th of this month. So, look, this is, again, unlike any other NFL training camp, unlike any other NFL season we've ever seen. So just saddle up. But I do want to go back and look at the 2020 NFL draft, and we start with the number 1 pick overall that belonged to the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, they needed a quarterback. They take LSU quarterback Joe Burrow, number 1 overall. That was a no-brainer to me. One of the best quarterback prospects I had watched on tape in a while. And we've seen some really good ones. Andrew Luck comes to mind. I mean, Baker Mayfield's tape was really clean, even though I didn't think he was worthy of the number 1 overall pick in that particular draft. That's nor here nor there. His tape was very, very clean. And so we've seen some really good quarterback prospects come out of the draft the last couple of years. There was a big quarterback draft a few years ago with Darnold and Josh Allen and all of those guys that went that same Baker Mayfield draft. So back in 2018. So I felt like Joe Burrow was better than all of those guys coming out of LSU, and it's amazing his trajectory, his rise, and that's another thing you're going to lose, and we'll talk about that on another podcast, that you're going to lose with potentially not having a college football season, or even if they push it back to the spring. A lot of these high-profile prospects aren't going to play in the spring. They're looking forward to going to the NFL, and so you lose the ability to really elevate your draft status, which is what Joe Burrow essentially did. A wise man told me that Joe Burrow's 2019 season was colder than February with extraordinary swag. And I agree wholeheartedly. I thought Joe Burrow showed the ability to lead a team amidst adversity. They played a tough, rugged, and rough schedule, did LSU, and they navigated their way through it. It seemed like effortlessly at times, with Joe Burrow slicing and dicing the college football scene. Another Heisman Trophy winner goes number 1 overall. And now the AFC North, if I'm not mistaken, now has 3 Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks starting in that division: Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, and now Joe Burrow. I love this selection, and I know some people call me crazy. I had somebody tell me, "Hey, Louie T, shut your dumb ass up." I said, "Hey, look, man, this is how I feel." Cincinnati's not as bad as everybody thinks, and I think if Joe Burrow is what I think he could be right away, this team, and I've always said this about Cincinnati, and then we'll move on. They draft extremely well. They're one of those teams. There are about a handful of them. Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Dallas, a handful of teams that just get it in the NFL draft. They get talented football players. Now, what they do with those players once they get them, another discussion for another day, but they do it right. And Cincinnati's one of those teams. consistently puts together strong drafts, have a bunch of talented football players, and now you add in a guy like Joe Burrow. They added T. Higgins. You're getting A.J. Green. It's A.J. Green back. They already have Tyler Boyd. They've got a bunch of weapons out there for him to get the football to. No one talks about Joe Mixon. He's one of the best young running backs in the league. They're stocked and chalked and ready to go offensively. The question will be defensively for Cincinnati. They went to the Minnesota Vikings store in the secondary this offseason in free agency. Don't know how that's going to work out for them. I'm not the biggest fan of shopping at the Minnesota Vikings cornerback and secondary store, but we'll see how that goes for them. If they can get some pass rush and find ways to maybe create some turnovers or just get off the field and get the football back to that offense, I think they got a chance to be explosive, put up some points. Look, he's a rookie. He's going to make some mistakes. Really like Joe Burrow and like him being added to a talented Cincinnati Bengals roster. We move on to the second pick in the draft that belonged to the Washington Redskins, now formerly the Washington Redskins, now the Washington football team. And they took edge rusher Chase Young out of the Ohio State University. This was a no-brainer to me. The best player in this draft class goes to the Washington football team, second overall. He's going to bolster what is already a very talented front in Washington. And really a lot of people feel like he's the missing piece. He's the missing link to really tie that entire defense together. They've struggled on the defensive side of the football, some of it for a lack of talent, but not up front at least. The back end is still a question mark for this team, but the easiest way to ease some of the back end issues that you may have is to get after the quarterback, Chase Young, one of the best in college football, if not the best, getting to the quarterback. Now he comes into the league with a bunch of fanfare and expectations. A lot of people are putting that Nick Bosa expectation on him, that Bosa came in last year, really tied together the room in San Francisco along that defensive line. He was the missing link there. They took off defensively, and you saw what the end result was there from a defensive standpoint. I don't think that's what's going to happen necessarily for the Redskins or the Washington football team in terms of them taking off because of the addition of Chase Young as a team. But defensively, I do think he is the missing piece, and I do think he is going to transform this Washington defense and take them to new heights. I've already been on record as saying this, and I'm going to double down on it again here because I haven't said this on the pod, that I think the Washington football team is going to lead the league in sacks this season. I think Chase Young's presence is that impactful. Now you got Montez Sweat on the other side. You've still got the Bama boys and the Bama wall inside, not to mention guys coming off the bench like Ryan Kerrigan and Matt Ioannidis, who led this team in sacks a season ago. This defensive line is ready to lead, and Chase Young, to me, is the guy that is going to be in front of that group. Big pickup for the Washington football team there at number 2 overall with Chase Young. You get to number 3. It's the Detroit Lions. They take the best cornerback in this year's draft, Jeffrey Okudah, out of the Ohio State University. So 2 out of the first 3 picks, Ohio State University alums, and you could easily say all 3 of the first picks were all at one point Ohio State Buckeyes, with Burrow transferring from Ohio State to LSU after being beat out by Dwayne Haskins. But you get back to Okudah in Detroit. It makes a ton of sense. It's what Matt Patricia has always wanted. It's what they did in New England. It's what Bill Belichick has preached since getting to New England, essentially. Give me an elite corner and I'll take care of the rest. When Belichick is at his best, he's got an elite corner. You go all the way back to Ty Law. You go to Asante Samuel. You go then to Stephon Gilmore now. He's all, and Darrelle Revis. Don't forget about Revis Island. This is what Belichick has always done. He'll take the elite corner over the elite edge rusher any day of the week, twice on Sundays. Matt Patricia, his understudy, going with that same philosophy here. Not that there was an opportunity to get Young. That would have been an interesting discussion whether they would have taken Young or Okudah had both of them been on the board. But I think he wanted Okudah all along. Gives him the ability to lock up guys outside. Darius Slay gave them a little bit of that. We'll see if he's able to live up to what Darius Slay did for Detroit when he was healthy, which wasn't often enough for me. But nonetheless, Jeffrey Okudah, very technically sound. Not the best athlete in the world. I find myself saying the same things I said about Darrelle Revis once upon a time. Not the best athlete in the world. Not going to wow you with his measurables in terms of his speed and things of that nature, his jumping ability or anything like that. But when you put on the tape, he's a technician, stays in phase, rarely it gets beat, doesn't allow guys over the top of him, has the length and the size you're looking for and that you crave at the cornerback position. He's a great fit for them. We'll see if they can get enough pass rush to marry with the addition of a Jeffrey Okudah in that secondary, but the Lions get their man at number 3 and help a defense that at times was really good last season, but to me could use upgrades, and they did that in this draft, getting another pass rusher and now adding an elite cornerback here after trading away Darius Slay in the offseason. You go to number 4. This is where I think the first surprise of the draft came. It was New York Giants selecting offensive tackle Andrew Thomas out of Georgia. This was a guy that I thought was the 3rd best tackle in the draft. I think Dave Gettleman elected to go with the safe pick here, not wanting to go with the upside of a Mekhi Becton, who I thought was the best tackle in this draft, or not wanting to go with a guy that was primarily a right tackle in college in in Jedrick Wills Jr., and not wanting to go with the rawness but extreme upside of a Tristan Wirfs. I had Andrew Thomas as my 3rd tackle behind Mekhi Becton and Jedrick Wills. Thought that the Giants, if they were going to try to protect their quarterback Daniel Jones' blind side, because Nate Solder was protecting it last year and didn't do a very good job of it, I thought they would go in a different direction, but they take the safest pick, Andrew Thomas. Remember, going into the draft or going into the college football season, Andrew Thomas was the consensus number 1 tackle potentially off the board. And then through no fault of his own, other guys just leapfrogged him for whatever reason. And really, it's because other guys had more upside. To me, Andrew Thomas is a clear package offensive tackle. You look inside and you can see what you're getting. You know exactly what you're getting. High ceiling, high floor, but they're one and the same. You know, with a guy like Mekhi Becton, yeah, maybe the floor is a little bit lower, but the ceiling is immensely high. Same thing with Jedrick Wills, probably a lot higher of a floor than a Mekhi Becton, but the ceiling is a lot higher to me. Andrew Thomas, not flashy. I think he's a guy that is extremely consistent and solid, and I think that's what the Giants were aiming for. They did not want to miss with this pick, especially after some of the things that happened in the offseason, like DeAndre Baker, which was a first-round pick. You don't want to miss on another first-rounder, so they decided to go with the safe pick, Andrew Thomas. I don't have a problem with it. I don't love it. I don't hate it either. Giants get their man at number 4. We get to number 5. There's a lot of intrigue surrounding this pick. Miami Dolphins, whether they were going to take a quarterback or whether they're going to trade up and try to do something else. There was a lot of talk. And I think, remember, I've talked about this. Believe half of what you see, none of what you hear, even if it's spat by me, your man, Louie Tee. It's Lions season during the draft. And the Dolphins, I think, leaked out that they were thinking about trading up to get Justin Herbert to kind of send a smoke signal out there and a smoke screen to get everybody off the trail of them wanting Tua, so nobody would trade up in front of them to get Tua. And Tua was the guy all along. And that's what it seemed like. It was the right move. I thought they were going to do something stupid. I was so ready. I had it locked and loaded. I had it cocked. I had my gun cocked, ready to say, that's that Dolphin shit. And then they did the right thing. Now, they did some Dolphin shit later on in the first round with some of their selections that I wasn't a big fan of, especially Austin Jackson that early at the tackle position. Ugh. But that's nor here nor there. They get the right guy here at number 5 in Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback out of Alabama. Yep, he dealt with some injuries, but this is a guy that the upside is immense. If you can keep this guy healthy, there probably isn't a better quarterback in this draft from a raw standpoint. The arm strength, the accuracy, the deep ball accuracy, all of these things that we love about Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow doesn't have the biggest arm in the world. Tua's got a much bigger arm than he does. Tua's not the best athlete, but he's very serviceable in that department. He's not the biggest guy either. He's not a 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" quarterback. He's more around 6'1", 6 feet. But that's nor here nor there. This is a guy that can flat out get it done. And if he's healthy, the Dolphins got their man. And they haven't had a franchise quarterback since Dan Marino. Think about that for a second. As a Washington football team fan, I've been in the quarterback wilderness for quite some time. We almost escaped with Kirk Cousins, but we blew that because that's what we do. And I thought to myself, what other organization can lay claim to being in the quarterback wilderness for as long as we have? The Miami Dolphins are right there. They've been in it for just as long as we have. But at least Marino was, his last season was 99? We haven't had a franchise quarterback since Joe Theismann. That was 85. Think about that for a second. Let that resonate for a second. 85. But again, I digress. They might have gotten their guy if they can keep him upright. Tua Tagovailoa, arguably the best quarterback in this draft when healthy. You get to number 6. It's the Los Angeles Chargers, who select quarterback Justin Herbert out of Oregon. This is a guy that I wasn't as high on, but for what they want to do in Los Angeles, I thought it was the perfect pick. This is a guy that's not going to turn it over, not going to wow you with a lot of the things that he does. He's not a big risk taker, which is a far cry from where they just came from with Phillip Rivers for over a decade and some change. A guy that high risk, high reward, boom or bust. They're looking to have someone manage the game, which is why Tyrod Taylor going to get a shot this year and probably do a really good job of keeping them in ball games and giving them a chance to win. Same thing that Justin Herbert's going to do. Much higher ceiling than a Tyrod Taylor, but again, a guy that to me wasn't ready to play right off the bat. So this is a great opportunity for him to learn behind a veteran. And when his number is called, I think he'll do a great job of managing the game. Is he more than a game manager? We're going to find out. But to me, he is a slight notch above game manager. And to me, that's a steep price to pay in the top 10 of a draft. But he's got everything you're looking for. He's got the size. He's got the athleticism. He's got the cannon of an arm. He's got everything that you're looking for. He's a smart guy. He's just got to put it together and be willing to take risks. And that's something that a lot of game managers just simply aren't prepared nor willing to do. We'll see if he's able to come out of his shell after a year of learning from Tyrod Taylor. And we know Tyrod Taylor, very fragile, very, very breakable. He could easily be called upon in week 4 of this season. Who's to say? But it'll be interesting to see what Justin Herbert does for the Los Angeles Chargers. We move on to number 7. This pick was occupied by the Carolina Panthers. They take the big, massive defensive tackle out of Auburn, Derek Brown, off the board. And they had a choice to make. Either go with the big, burly, havoc-wreaking defensive tackle, or you go with the Swiss Army knife that is Isaiah Simmons. They elected to go with the defensive tackle. Here was their logic. We can get us an Isaiah Simmons clone. It may be a great value version of it, which they ultimately got later on in the draft, but we can't get another one of these Derek Brown guys. They don't grow on trees. And so we'll take the dominant defensive tackle and we'll double back and get a great value version of Isaiah Simmons. And so they take Derek Brown. To me, his tape was just filthy. Just a guy that just destroyed games, destroyed interior offensive linemen on a consistent basis. He was a havoc wreaker. He was a one-man wrecking crew at times on what was a very talented Auburn defense. To me, the best defense in college football in 2019. And he spearheaded that attack. And he was dominant up front. He pushed the pocket. To me, he's not a dominant pass rusher. That's what I'm waiting to see him develop. I think he has the tools to be able to do it. I'm not sure if he'll ever be a double-digit sack getter at the next level, but what he will be is a dominant force up front that you'll have to double team. If you don't, you're going to pay the price very dearly. So the Panthers, they feel like they got an edge rusher in Brian Burns last year. They needed someone to push the pocket so that Burns wouldn't be rushing off the edge in vain. They get that guy here in Derek Brown. And not only is he a guy that's going to blow things up in the middle, stop the run and be a physical presence there, he's going to push the pocket. And if he ever develops a bevy of moves as a pass rusher, he's got the quickness, he's got the strength to be able to transfer speed to power. He's got the ability to do some things. He's just got to put it together as a pass rusher. I don't know if he'll develop in that regard. We will see. But we get to the number 8 pick in this draft, and it's the Arizona Cardinals who take the aforementioned Isaiah Simmons, Swiss Army knife, out of Clemson off the board. This was a no-brainer. Best player available on the board at this point of the draft. There aren't many players in this draft quite like him. 6'4", runs a sub 4.4 40, can play safety, can play linebacker. In today's NFL, where you have to have guys that are extremely versatile with all of these tight ends, and to me, They couldn't have taken a better player for their particular division. When you talk about George Kittle and all the havoc he's been wreaking in that division, now you stick an Isaiah Simmons on him and you say, all right, big fella, go after George Kittle and try to take him away. Same thing could be said for, some of the other teams in that division, whether the Rams want to try to get freaky with their running back, Cam Akers, who's a rookie out of the backfield, or they want to try to get freaky with, say, Cooper Kupp in the slot. You can say, all right, Isaiah, take this guy away. In terms of Seattle, they want Russell Wilson to be contained and kept in the pocket. Now you say, all right, Isaiah, you spy him, and if need be, we'll have you chase Russell Wilson down. So to me, this is a guy that just fits in this division because he can do so many things for an Arizona Cardinals defense that honestly could use some upgrades in talent. They're young. They're hungry. They're fun to watch. Offensively, they added Nuke Hopkins on the offensive side. Now you add Isaiah Simmons on the defensive side to what is already a very intriguing defense. I've been saying this all along. Look out for a massive leap from the Arizona Cardinals this season if they're able to stay relatively healthy. And it's because of guys like Isaiah Simmons at number 8. You go to number 9, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars, who select Florida cornerback C.J. Henderson. Super intelligent C.J. Henderson off the board. This was my second corner in this draft. I think there was a big drop-off after Henderson. Now, there are some questions about C.J. Henderson. One, about his physicality, willingness to tackle on the outside. Two, another thing with him is can he stay on top of guys? He's been nonchalant at times, allowing guys to get behind him. Also, a guy that will fall asleep behind the wheel in zone coverage and bust a coverage or two. So there are some question marks about him. But when he's dialed in, when he's locked in, this is a guy that can easily be a primary corner for any team in this league. And so Jacksonville loses Jalen Ramsey to a trade during the season. They need to replace him. This is the way that they're going to go about doing that. They also traded away A.J. Bouye. So they're in a position now where they're revamping that secondary. And this is a great start, getting a guy that has all the tools, has the size at 6'1", up over 200 pounds, has some length, has the speed to run and stay in phase. He's just got to be dialed in. He's got to be locked in mentally. And also, he needs to be locked in physically as well in terms of coming up in run support and being willing to put his body on the line. But they got themselves a premium athlete here at number 9, did the Jacksonville Jaguars, in cornerback C.J. Henderson. You move on to number 10. It's the Cleveland Browns taking offensive tackle Jedrick Wills Jr. out of Alabama, primarily a right tackle at Alabama. But remember, he was protecting the blind side of Tua Tagovailoa, who is a left-handed quarterback. So again, you could easily talk about him flipping sides and playing left tackle at the next level. Remember, keep in mind, the Browns just went out and got right tackle in free agency. So the thought process here is that Jedrick Wills is probably going to play the left tackle position, which left tackle, right tackle, really, I don't give a damn. This guy is ultra smooth. One of the smoothest tackles I've seen since probably that 2014 draft. I believe that was the Jake Matthews draft, Taylor Lewan, all of those guys that just loaded draft with tackles. This is a guy that is extremely silky smooth, typewriter feet, quiet. And I've said this a bunch of times. He plays the game at his pace. And so pass rushers don't speed him up. They don't get him off balance. They don't get him off kilter. This is a guy that I really like. And so it'll be interesting to see what the Browns decide to do with him, whether they try to kick him inside or keep him at tackle. The presumption is they're going to keep him at tackle. Now the question is, what side? Obviously, you go out, you spend the kind of money that they did on the Tennessee Titans former right tackle. It leads me to believe that they're going to put him at left tackle. We will see. But to me, he was my number 2 tackle in this draft. So to get him at number 10, you got to feel like you got a steal there. And one of the big issues last year, outside of their head coach, Freddie Kitchens, who was way in over his head and too much ego and too much confidence that bordered on arrogance. No, it didn't border. It was arrogant between the head coach and the quarterback. I think you're going to see a much better system in place this year with Kevin Stefanski coming in. I think Baker Mayfield is going to look like what everybody expected him to look like last year, this year. And a big part of the reason why is because he's going to be protected, something he wasn't last year. So you get to number 11, and that's the New York Jets taking my number one tackle off the board in Louisville tackle Mekhi Becton. The floor is a little bit lower than the other guys, but the ceiling to me is much higher than the other guys. He's big. He's physical. I've heard people talk about, this guy could eat his way out of the league. I don't know any of that stuff right now. For me, all of that is unfounded. I can just tell you this: 370-pound tackles don't grow on trees. And the last time I saw one of these guys come into the league and I underestimated him, or the last two, I should say, that I saw come into the league and I underestimated them, both ended up being outstanding tackles. One's in Oakland that came from New England, that came from San Francisco, in Brown from Florida. And then the other was Orlando Brown so both of them were Browns, Trent Brown and Orlando Brown, who we mocked because of his poor showing at the combine, and the Ravens take him in the third round, and he's just been dominant for them on the right side of their offensive line. So in my mind, you get these big guys with these long tree trunk arms that are physical, and they'll figure it out. And to me, Mekhi Becton's already figured a lot of things out. He's still got a lot of learning to do and a ways to go. But for a guy that has a lot of learning and a ways to go, to be as dominant as he's been in the tape that he's put forth, to me, he was the number one tackle in this draft. And the Jets need to protect Sam Darnold. That's an investment that they're really looking to protect. This is the kind of guy you get to do exactly that. And I think the Jets really should feel good about getting Mekhi Becton at number 11. So that's a quick breakdown of the first 11 picks. We'll do the next 10 or 11 tomorrow on the show. But I want to wrap up this show by jumping into some garbage time, or as I like to say, garbage time. So I want to talk about Dalvin Cook's feeble attempt at a holdout. And I know it's a little late for this, but again, I'm going to be talking about some things that already happened because we haven't been on this platform, which is where I usually talk about these things. So we know the CBA has been ratified. It's new, and there are a lot of things in there that you might not be aware of. And one of the things is that holdouts for guys under contract are essentially obsolete now. And so I laughed when I saw Dalvin Cook, demanding a new contract. And I'm like, dude, you're not getting a damn thing, and you can't do a damn thing about it. The only guys that have any leverage in terms of holding out are guys that have been extended a franchise tag and haven't signed it. And so those are the only guys that can still hold out without any punishment, with impunity, essentially. Everyone else, if you're under contract, the days of, I got 1 year left on my deal and I want a new deal and I'm not showing up, and, holding out for the first 6 days of camp until something is reached, whether it's a verbal agreement or an actual agreement is reached, and amassing, $250,000 worth of fines, and then having the team just wipe those away once you show up. Those days are over. In the new CBA, it specifically states that nor the team or the organization or the player, you can't get rid of these fines. All right. And it's mandated that player be subjected to those fines. So let's say that it's $40,000 a day for missing camp. And you miss 10 days of camp. That's $400,000. And you got to pay it out of your pocket. You can't just have the team dismiss those. We've seen that in the past. Guy holds out for 5 days, shows up, the team wipes those fees away, and everybody goes on, sings Kumbaya, bygones are bygones. That's no longer the case. You got to either show up or those fines start accruing. And once you get there, you got to pay them. Also, if you miss 5 consecutive days of camp, or you leave the team unexcused at any point for the season, 5 consecutive days, you lose an accrued season. So you might be bitching for a contract in the offseason, but it's not going to help you to miss 5 consecutive days at any point during the course of the season, because if you do, you're still that much further away. Let's say you got 2 years left on your deal. You want a new deal. Well, guess what? You're now still 2 years left on your deal and 2 years left away from free agency if you don't show up within a 5-day period. Let's say you're 1 year away. This is your contract season. You wanted a contract. They didn't give it to you. You can't leave for a 5-day period in a row and not show up unexcused, or your accrued season is then wiped away and you're still 1 year away from free agency. So they've put a lot of poison pills essentially in there for players that thought that they were going to find a way to hold out to demand a contract. They've taken a little bit of that power away from players, which is why when players decide to take to socials and act an ass like Jamal Adams did to force their way out of a situation, I don't necessarily get upset, because there aren't many ways for a player to get out of a really bad situation. And I get it. Some of you hate when players do that, and I get it. I understand that dynamic, but also there's the other end of the spectrum where you're just like, hey, I just want to get paid. Like Yannick Ngakoue in Jacksonville is a prime example of a situation like that. So I just wanted to touch on that. Like, Darwin, what the hell are you doing? Dude, show up. You have no power, no leverage, and he ultimately showed up on time to training camp for the Minnesota Vikings, like I knew he was going to do. And then finally, I just wanted to throw this out. Keenan Allen was complaining and bitching about his standing in the NFL top 100. He came in at 77 on the list, and he was like the number 11 or 12 wide receiver on the list. And he was complaining about not being ahead of guys like Tyreek Hill and Mike Evans. And I can understand his gripe with the other wide receiver in Tampa Bay who just had a breakout season, Chris Godwin. But I thought to myself, when I heard Keenan Allen bitching and complaining, I said, is Keenan Allen even a top 7 wide receiver in this league? Because he keeps talking about how he's number 1. And I sat down and I compiled a list. At first, I was like, is he even a top 10? And then I had to say, hey, dude, you tripping. Stop. Come on now. Like, you may not think that this guy is a top 5 receiver in this league. You may not think he's top 7, but he's top 10. I said, okay, all right, you're right. But is he even a top 7 wide receiver in this league? I don't think so. And I can run down a list of 7 guys before I even get to a Keenan Allen. And I might be even able to get to 10 guys if healthy. And that's the thing. Guys haven't been healthy, so I can't put them ahead of him right now. But if they're healthy, I'd put them ahead of him. So you've got Michael Thomas. You've got Nuke Hopkins. You've got Mike Evans. You've got Julio. You've got Devontae Adams, who I think is grossly underrated in this league. You've got Tyreek Hill. Stephon Diggs, for me, is a top flight wide receiver, which is why the Buffalo Bills paid the price that they paid, which was a steep one, but a price nonetheless worth paying to get a guy that you know is a legit number 1 wide receiver in this league. That's 7 guys right there. Then you get to shame on you if you step to the old dirty Beckham, Odell Beckham Jr., and so ODB, if healthy, to me, much better than Keenan Allen. AJ Green, it's AJ Green, is another guy that I feel like, look, if he's healthy, he's better than a Keenan Allen. And then I'd even take Allen Robinson before I take Keenan Allen. I don't know about you. I'd take Allen Robinson before I take Keenan Allen, but that's another story for another day. I might be disrespecting Keenan Allen. I want to hear your thoughts on that. Is Keenan Allen actually a top 7 wide receiver in this league? He's damn sure not top 5. I don't know what the hell he thinks this is. He's not a top 5 receiver in this league, but can he squeeze into the top 7? I got him on the outside looking in. He's somewhere in that 8-9 range, maybe. He might squeeze into 7. If I actually made a list, I don't think he would get into the top 7. I think he'd actually be somewhere in that 8, 9, 10 range, somewhere 8 to 10. What says you? Keenan Allen, top 7 wide receiver in this league? I think not, but you tell me what you think. And so that's going to do it for the Louie Tee Network Podcast, 78th installment. I thank you guys for joining me. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not, I repeat, not the best NFL coverage it could be. But we're going to do this again a couple times this week. So a couple more times. Then we're going to have a more set schedule eventually. So you guys stay tuned for that. But going to work out the kinks, and then we're going to start doing this thing live. It'll be in the morning time, so shouldn't be too many situations where I come on a little plastered, got a cup of wine in my hand or anything like that. But maybe you get a surprise, man. Sometimes you might get an early morning surprise. I don't know. I can't say. I'll just say this. I thank you guys for joining me. Remember, stay safe, take care, and we will reconvene tomorrow. Okay, so look for another episode of the Louie Tee Network Podcast, 79th installment tomorrow. And remember, if you're listening to this like you normally do on your podcast platform, you can get it there as well. So you guys take care, and I'll see you next time.